Volunteer Park, baby! This is Taco Time's annual home race that we put on. It is a blast, so I was out here racing and volunteering for the majority of the day, as were most of my teammates. It was a really good time. Luckily, for the most part throughout the day, the weather held. You can see it's obviously pretty nice. We raced at around 11:15, and it was sunny and about 60 degrees. There was a little bit of a turn later in the day during specifically the women's P12 race. It rained super hard for 15 minutes or so and then hailed for a couple minutes. So hats off to everyone who finished that race. They raced like total badasses in the pouring rain when their race had started in the sun and ended up in the pouring rain. So that did not look super fun. But luckily for me, our race earlier in the day did not have any such issues. Let's talk about the course a little bit. We obviously saw the start-finish line there. We're going to be coming up again on it in about 20 seconds or 30 seconds here. The course is not dissimilar to Seward Park in that it's a very similar length. It's about a minute 45-second lap or so. And Seward Park is also right under a 2-minute lap, I believe, on faster days at least. And similar to Seward Park, it has a descent and then a hill and then kind of a false flat drag to the finish. Now the false flat is a little shorter here than it is at Seward. We're coming up on the start-finish line here. But one of the distinguishing features of our race was there was a pretty significant cross headwind on this section. You can kind of see it on the trees in the upper right. It took me a couple laps to sort of get a hang of that and figure out where on the course I should be racing. I'm riding on a new bike that has deeper tires than I'm used to. I think it has 65s, and I definitely felt the wind a little bit both on the bottom of the hill, on the straight section on the bottom of the hill, and then going across and into that start-finish line. You'll see throughout the race I was doing way more power than I wanted to on that false flat section, onto the start-finish line. I'm kind of okay with little gaps opening up here because I'm still in the draft. I will also say this descent is just a tiny bit sketchy. You could probably see it there. The road is kind of slanted in the opposite direction than you would want it to be for that curve there. And there was actually a crash later in the men's Cat 3 race, which was after the rain had stopped. Some people crashed right there, kind of at the bottom of that hill where the turn starts. It's really easy to slide out. No one crashed in our race, luckily, but it definitely took me a couple laps to get comfortable doing that in a group. And this was another mistake that I make consistently throughout the race now as I've been watching this footage back, you want to be on the left side here. Going into this section, because that's where that crosswind is coming from. So the left side, over where my teammate Mark is in the blue helmet, is just a much more sheltered side. And right now is not too bad, but like I said, you'll pretty consistently throughout the race see me doing more power than I want to through this section. There were 4 preems over this, I want to say 40-minute race. Yeah, 40-minute race. We didn't really know what the preems were beforehand. There's a couple, I think 3 cash preems, and then 1 preem was entrance into an omnium. The other thing that I will say, the last sort of thing at the start of this race, is having watched all the races yesterday. This was one of the first races. It was like the third race of the day, I want to say. Basically every race except for one was won by either a small group breakaway or a solo rider off the front. So I think if our race had been later in the day, I would have been a little more armed with that knowledge and would have kind of tried to stay further up in the field than I am near the beginning of the race so that I could be in a better spot to respond to attacks. Because where I am right now, I can sort of see the front of the field, but I'm really not in a good spot necessarily if these guys try to jump. I'll get squeezed on this corner and have to go around a couple people. I just raced this race tactically kind of poorly, and so part of why I do these videos, obviously, is to watch it back and think about the mistakes that I made. Again, here's a mistake. Just being on the inside line in this corner is not worth it because it puts you on the unsheltered side from the wind, and I'm having to close down a little gap here that just opened up on that hill. So clearly I should have been further up. And it actually looks like up the road there's a couple riders attacking already. And those might have been the riders, at least one of them might have been one of the riders that went off and, spoiler alert, was in the podium for the race. So this race was won by two riders who were, I think one of them was solo off the front for a while, and then one of them bridged up to them. Between the two of them, off the front for at least half of the race, I want to say. So that might not have been the winning move just there that went up the road, but the winning move is going to go up the road eventually. So with all that said, I think I'm just going to let the race play out for a little bit. I did not go for any preems. My plan was not to go for any preems, and I also wasn't really trying to cover attacks necessarily, which clearly I should have been. Like I said, that was a mistake that, with the hindsight of having watched all the other races in the day, I hopefully wouldn't have made, but I just wasn't entirely prepared for this. It feels like it shouldn't be as much of a breakaway course as it is. I don't know if it's kind of these little twisty sections here, and then the turn around the water tower that's that kind of spherical turn right after the start-finish. I don't know if it's that those sections kind of slow down the group quite a bit, and so if you're an individual rider, you can pick and choose the best line a lot better and not get slowed up. I don't know if it was because of the crosswinds, but, for whatever reason, all day long, almost all the races at Volunteer Park in all of the categories were a small group or solo rider breakaway. So with that being said, all right, I'm actually going to shut up for a while now and just let the race play out, and I will probably be back closer to the end.
Here to try to hold.
So a couple riders that I was looking out for here. This Husky cycling rider on the left, number 610. I don't know his name off the top of my head, but I've ridden with him a couple times at Seward and at some road races. He's really strong. I know from racing with him previously that he is a rider who likes to send frequent and hard attacks. So I was kind of thinking in my head, like, oh, if he's not in a breakaway, he will probably try to break away later in the race. And then one of these Mercedes riders, I don't know if it's the one right in front of me right now, I don't think it is. His name is Daniel, and he's also pretty strong, has also had some pretty good results in some of the road races earlier in the year. So there are a couple guys that I was kind of looking out for and was thinking like, well, maybe if they're not in moves, it's not as scary. But one of the ways in which I messed up in this race is Mercedes had the rider behind me and to the left is getting yelled at for swerving off his line on that turn there. That's definitely a little sketchy. Mercedes had a lot of riders in this race. We had like 6 riders, but a couple of us were off the back pretty quickly, and so really we had 4 riders for the majority of the race. And then Mercedes also had like 4 to 6 riders, I want to say, and so I really should have been paying closer attention to which Mercedes riders were in the break and if Mercedes riders were in the break, because one of the ways in which I really think we got outplayed here was that they got a strong rider in the break and then they just kind of shut down the chase for a significant part of the race. And then there's also this second UW rider here with the fender on his bike. Racing a Criterium with a fender on your bike is it's a decision, but spoiler alert, this guy wins the race. So you know what? Who the hell am I to judge? I remember thinking right at this point in the race when I was on his wheel, thinking it was pretty funny. I can't actually remember. So this is the guy. This UW rider in front of me, number 15, is the guy who eventually bridges up to the solo rider off the front, which is a Mercedes rider, and then is off the front with him for a really long time and beats him in the eventual sprint. I remember not really being aware when the first move went that it was going. That was another huge mistake, just a lack of situational awareness, lack of race awareness in the race. Like I said, I'm just sitting too far back in the pack. I should have put a little more effort into being a little further up in the pack, but my expectation in this race going into it, which clearly was flawed, was that it would race similarly to Seward, where any of these moves in the first half of the race really were not going to be super threatening, because that tends to be true at Seward. Is if someone goes in the first 50% of the race, with more than realistically like 5 or 10 minutes to go, it's probably not really a scary move. But as I've said many times at this point, clearly that was a mistake to think.
Coming across the line, still pursuing early. Inside. Yep. We're within decent striking distance here as they come up the hill. We've seen good effort. Coalition in front of the field the whole time. Finished up here. Another big effort. He's to lead out the group right now. Now, the page through the point of this hill. 22:45. Benz riders and a rider in the purple. Magidson.
So right here, Bailey sends a big move. this is actually really smart racing from Bailey. He's marking this Mercedes rider who's going off the front. That is exactly what he should be doing here. The big mistake that we made, I think, is that when he eventually gets brought back, I can't remember if it's like a lap or two from now or if it's sooner or later than that. When he got brought back, I or Matt or someone else on the team should have just sent a counter, because as it is, I don't know if that Mercedes rider that went off with him is the one who stays off and only Bailey gets brought back, or if the Mercedes rider also gets brought back. But I do know that that was definitely a smart move from Bailey. He's, feeling out what the field is going to be like, and you definitely can put some time into folks if you're actually like pedaling down this hill. Like you can see, basically our entire group at this point, except for the person on the front, is just totally cruising. But I do know that Bailey's attack, one way or another, was not successful. It was brought back eventually here. I think right there I was thinking for just a second about trying to carry some speed and bridge up, but this Apex rider coming around me kind of stopped me from shooting up through the inside here. I'm also, Matt and I are, at least I think this is what Matt's doing, I'm trying to go to the front to see if we can slow down this move for Bailey a bit. Ooh, the power data really looks like it's miscalibrated here. My mistake, because I definitely don't think I was doing 0 watts for that long there. Yeah, this power data is, I think, incorrect. But yeah, these two UW riders both sending it up is definitely threatening, and so I'm going to have to close down this little gap right here. Yeah, so there's a 20-second gap to the leader, and I think he was maybe saying even that there was like a 5 or 10-second gap to the next group, which would be Bailey and that other Mercedes rider who went off the front with him. So I think this might be the point in the race at which this UW rider, yeah, I think this UW rider right now is just going to ride off the front and bridge up to the leader. I could be mistaken. It could be a little bit later on in the race, but I think this might be the point. Yeah, so here's Bailey getting brought back. Again, clearly this this power data is off by at least a couple seconds here. But this was a really big mistake from me. I definitely should have been a little further up, either sending a counterattack of my own, or at least just making sure that, because I know Bailey's exhausted at this point if he's getting brought back, trying to see if I can either at least mark these two Mercedes riders or send a counterattack of my own. Really, that's what I should have done. If the power meter data is at all right, and I haven't just totally miscalibrated it, if I haven't like totally screwed up the timing of this, if my heart rate really was in like the 160s here, I was probably feeling pretty good. Definitely should have been thinking about sending something. I don't know. I think I actually kind of suffered yesterday from being too invested in wanting to win the race and too much in my own head about feeling like, oh, okay, I need to be sitting in, I need to be conserving my energy as much as I can, and that got in the way of me being able to have awareness of the race to the level that I usually do, and also just be willing to race. It's a little embarrassing to watch this back for sure, because like, I raced kind of stupid, and I know the ways in which I race stupid, and I definitely race smarter than this at Seward on a regular basis, which, like I said, is in many ways a very similar course to this. So, but that being said, you know, you live and learn, and at the end of the day, both the Mercedes guy who got second and the UW guy who won were both just crazy strong. So who the hell knows? Even if my tactics were perfect, if we could have done anything. Another thing that I'll say is I think that we as a Taco Time team probably at some point in the race, probably around this point in the race actually, needed to be better about getting organized on the front and starting to like trade pulls and actually try to pull the leader back. As you will see in, I don't know, in 5 minutes or so, with about 3 laps to go, I kind of tried to do that myself. Like I went to the front and took a really big pull that was basically like a half lap pull just on my own, and was kind of just risking it for the biscuit a little bit, but that was way too late, and it was too little that it was just me. And I do think that Bailey going off the front definitely led to the group accelerating a little bit to try to catch him, but it obviously, you know, that's not quite the same as us being coordinated and trading pulls on the front.
Just to the field, the Regal Omnium this lap, lead the field, and get the Regal Omnium. Field free, next time around.
So if you caught that, that was that Mercedes rider to my left talking to the rest of his teammates and saying that they shouldn't chase and should make us chase, which was absolutely correct. Kind of pissed me off, despite the fact that I was actually going to the front already to start trying to take a pull. I was definitely feeling a little bit discouraged at this point. I mean, I think I kind of knew that if people weren't working really hard, there was literally zero chance we were going to catch them at this point. There probably was zero chance from a lap or two back, if I'm being realistic, looking at it, in retrospect. But I wanted to be able to walk away from the race saying that I at least tried once to put in a dig and try to catch that group. So, like I mentioned earlier, I do put in a pretty big pull through the false flat there, and I think into the ascent here. I'm also in the back of my head kind of thinking, okay, well, there's like 3 laps to go. If I put in a pull here, I should be able to not lose too many wheels and be in a decent wheel for the bunch sprint at the end. This kind of backfires a little bit for reasons that will be clear in a minute or so. But yeah, like I said, I'm not emptying myself here by any means, but I'm definitely putting in a little more effort than I had been on other laps of this race.
Saying 2 to go. 2 to go.
So coming up pretty shortly here was the point in the race that was maybe the most frustrating for me, which was first this Mercedes rider swerving over pretty hard. I had to squeeze the brakes pretty considerably there and lost a decent amount of speed. And this wasn't this UW rider's fault, but the UW rider coming up next to him, all of this, people kind of have to squeeze the brakes going into this corner a little bit, and I end up losing a pretty substantial amount of wheels because of that squeeze right there. And kind of even more tragically, so I'm now having to sprint to just try and stay with this group, which was really frustrating. I also went from like 4th or 5th wheel to like 15th wheel here, and tragically Bailey was either right behind me or like a wheel and a half behind me, and so he lost kind of even more position than I did. And I actually think that right there kind of bottled Bailey's race pretty substantially. I just lobbed that water bottle off to the side. But yeah, I'm definitely feeling a little bit of pressure now here with 1 to go. Ooh, Mark kind of having a little trouble on his line there. Yeah, definitely feeling a little bit of pressure here because there is not a super good place to move up in sort of this half of the race, or this half of the lap, excuse me. I probably should have just kept pedaling and tried to move up the outside here, and as a matter of fact, I think I do that, if for no other reason than I'm worried that this group might split up a little bit. But because of the way that the hill is, there's this little kind of, it's not quite a chicane, but it's, a slight right into a slight left right here, and then another slight right, and then another slight left. People really spread out here. They really spread out and they really slow down. So I felt really good. I wanted to open up on the left there, and then I'm realizing, oh shit, I have no space to open up here. So I go to the right instead, which is a lot worse, and I know it's a lot worse because I'm gonna inevitably get squeezed into this corner, right? I have a rider to my inside, I have a rider to my outside, and they're gonna squeeze like that going into the corner. But I'm just gonna sprint as hard as I can, and this is a little bit of what was frustrating, is I actually felt pretty good about this effort, and I felt like I could have done a pretty similar effort with a harder effort up the hill before this, and I feel like, you know, if it weren't for the fact that I came out of that corner several seconds behind these 4 guys who finished in front of me, I definitely could have finished a little better there. But that's about it. Kind of a disappointing race, mostly for me screwing it up tactically. But that's racing.